G-Day, everyone. Welcome back to the SPX podcast, the global chessboard, where we uncover the hidden layers of politics, history, and economics that shape our world. I'm thrilled to have you here with me today. If this is your first time tuning in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a like. It really helps us grow this community of curious minds. Now, if you're someone who's fascinated by geopolitics, economics, or the mechanisms behind global power, this episode is definitely for you. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that's been pivotal to shaping the modern world, the petrodollar. What exactly is the petrodollar? You might have heard the term tossed around in the news or online discussions. At its core, the petrodollar represents more than just an economic agreement, it's a cornerstone of American global dominance. Think of it as a quiet, invisible force that has allowed the US to wield influence across continents without relying solely on military power. But here's the kicker, that foundation, the one that's upheld US supremacy for decades, is now under serious threat. Why? Because on June 9 this year, the oil $4 agreement between the United States and Saudi Arabia officially expired. And as of today, there's no sign of a renewal. Let that sink in. The deal that effectively tied the global oil trade to the US dollar, a deal that has underpinned the American economy for half a century, might be coming to an end. What does this mean for the US? For the rest of the world? And perhaps, most importantly, how did we even get here? That's what we're unpacking today. Part 1, A History of US Wars, the Petrodollar Connection. To understand the petrodollar system and why it's so critical, we first need to look at a pattern that's hard to ignore. Think about the major conflicts involving the United States in the past 50 years, the Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and Syria. What do these wars have in common? On the surface, you might say they're about combating terrorism, spreading democracy, or securing human rights. But if we dig deeper, a different story emerges, one that ties all these conflicts to oil and the preservation of the petrodollar. The US has spent trillions of dollars and lost countless lives in these wars. Yet, the real question is, why does America feel the need to insert itself into so many foreign conflicts? Is it about protecting its ideals? Or is there something else at play? The truth lies in the currency we use every day, the US dollar. It's not just money, it's a tool of global dominance. And this dominance is rooted in a single commodity, oil. Part 2, What is the petrodollar system? Let's rewind to the 20th century. After World War II, the US emerged as the world's dominant economic power. In 1944, during the Bretton Woods Conference, the US dollar was established as the global reserve currency, pegged to gold at $35 per ounce. Other nations agreed to link their currencies to the dollar. But this system began to crumble in the 1970s. Why? Because the US government was spending beyond its means, funding wars in Vietnam and Korea while grappling with inflation. As foreign nations demanded gold in exchange for their dollar reserves, America's gold supply dwindled. In 1971, President Richard Nixon made a bold move. He severed the dollar's link to gold. This decision turned the US dollar into a fiat currency, meaning its value was no longer backed by a tangible asset. The world's reserve currency now relied solely on faith in the US government and economy. But faith alone wasn't enough. The US needed a new system to maintain the dollar's dominance. And that's where oil came in. In the early 1970s, the US struck a game-changing deal with Saudi Arabia, the world's largest oil exporter. The agreement was simple: Saudi Arabia would sell its oil exclusively in US dollars. And in return, the US would provide military protection and advanced weaponry. Soon after, the rest of the OPEC nations followed suit. This was the birth of the petrodollar system. Part 3. How the petrodollar propped up US dominance. The petrodollar system did more than just tie oil to the dollar. It created a global dependency on the US currency. If you're a country that needs oil, and let's face it, which nation doesn't, you need US dollars to buy it. This meant that countries had to hold large reserves of dollars, fueling global demand for the currency. This system gave the US a unique advantage. For decades, America could run massive trade deficits, importing goods from around the world while exporting very little in return. Why? Because the world's dependence on the dollar kept its value high. It also allowed the US to borrow cheaply, fund its military, and maintain its status as a global superpower, all while other nations essentially subsidized its economy. Part 4. The cracks in the system. But here's where things start to unravel. The petrodollar system has always relied on one thing: trust in America's ability to lead and protect. In recent years, however, that trust has eroded. Countries like China and Russia are pushing for alternatives to the dollar. Saudi Arabia, once America's staunchest ally in the Middle East, is now diversifying its alliances, engaging with China, and even discussing oil trade in other currencies. And let's not forget Iraq and Libya. Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi both tried to challenge the petrodollar. Saddam by trading oil in euros, Gaddafi by proposing a gold-backed African currency. Both leaders were removed, and their nations plunged into chaos. But this time, the challenge isn't coming from a single leader. It's coming from an entire system that no longer sees the US as indispensable. Part 5. What's next? So, what happens if the petrodollar collapses? For the US, the consequences could be dire. A weaker dollar would make imports more expensive, drive up inflation, and diminish America's ability to project power abroad. For the rest of the world, the shift could bring both opportunities and risks. New systems of trade and finance might emerge, but the transition could be chaotic. What do you think? Are we witnessing the decline of American hegemony? Or is the US simply adapting to a new global reality? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to share this episode with anyone who loves a good deep dive into global politics. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep questioning the world around you. This extended version dives deeper into the historical, political, and economic contexts, providing a rich narrative for your audience while keeping them engaged.